Anyone who's ever lost a pet knows the agony and the worry about where they are, whether they're hungry, whether they're hurt, and probably the biggest question, whether you're ever going to see them again. Well, on today's episode of Starlight Pet Talk, we're going to talk about one simple thing that you can do that will greatly increase the odds that if your pet goes missing, that you will see them again. So stay tuned. You're listening to Starlight Pet Talk, a podcast for pet parents who want the best pet care advice from cat experts, dog trainers, veterinarians, and other top pet professionals who will help you live your very best life with your pets. We also share inspiring rescue and adoption stories from people who've taken their love of pets to the next level by getting involved in animal welfare. My name is Amy Castro, and I'm the founder and president of Starlight Outreach and Rescue and a columnist for Pet Age magazine. I've rescued thousands of animals and helped people just like you find the right pet for their family. My mission is to help pet parents learn all the ways that they can care for, live with, and even have fun with their pets, so they can live their very best lives and their pets can too. Welcome to Starlight Pet Talk. I'm your host, Amy Castro, and my guest today, Dr. Matt Goetz, is the Senior Professional Services Veterinarian to Merck Animal Health. They're the makers of the Home Again Microchip, as well as many other great products that enhance the lives of our pets. And Dr. Matt works really closely with organizations around the country to help them make a positive impact on animals in their community. But what I like most about him is that he also has served as a medical director for an animal shelter in Phoenix, Arizona. So he has seen the life-saving impact of microchips for pets firsthand. And I'm sure the frustration that I and a lot of our colleagues in rescue and sheltering have faced when you find an animal that doesn't have a microchip and you desperately want to get them back to their family and you just struggle. So, Dr. Matt, thank you so much for being on Starlight Pet Talk today.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to doing this.
Yeah, this is the one I've been looking forward to as well because, like I said, I've been doing this for over probably 13, 14 years now, and there's nothing more exciting than running that scanner over an animal and having it go beep, and then actually being able to reunite the animal with the owner. But I also wanted to educate pet parents because a lot of people have some misconceptions about what the microchip is, what it can and cannot do, and the impact of the microchip. So if you don't mind, can you start off not at a hugely technological level, but just give us a ballpark idea of what exactly is the microchip and how does it work?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So the microchip itself is about 12 millimeters, so it's pretty small. That's a standard size microchip, so about the size of a piece of rice, as I tell people. What we do with that as veterinarians is we'll actually implant that under your dog's skin, and for the most part, it generally goes between the shoulder blades. But it's actually there's no battery to it. It's inactive, so there's no need to replace it or moving parts or anything like that. And then in terms of what we get from that is there's a personal kind of identification number on that microchip. So let's say, your animal's lost or goes missing, and then somebody takes our scanners or a scanner and scans that animal. What we would show up is that personal identification number and usually the number of the manufacturer to call. But that's generally how a microchip, the size of it and how it works. Obviously, we'll get into a little bit more detail, but overall, that's kind of what we're looking at is kind of that small grain of rice just going under the skin, and that's going to give your pet lifetime identification.
Mm-hmm. And I know we stress the importance of it, but I'm just curious to hear from your perspective. Why do you think microchipping pets is such a critical thing in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for so many reasons, and me personally, I've had my own pets go missing that have had to be scanned and get it back to me. So the value of it is something that, as a personal person going through it, I can't overemphasize the value of that microchip. But, all of us were kind of, we move or, hey, we're walking our dog one day and, we're all good pet parents, as I always tell people. So this isn't at first saying, hey, you're a bad pet parent, but this is for the times that we don't think of. So I'm taking my dog for a walk and it gets spooked and it slips his leash and he runs away. So now he's got no leash on, no tags, no identification, no collar, nothing like that. And oh my gosh, how are we going to get back in contact with our animal? Well, having that microchip there, if the animal is picked up by, a Good Samaritan, taken to a veterinarian, or picked up by animal control, and they scan that animal and they find that microchip, then they can contact you and get you back in connection with your animal and happily ever after.
Yeah, we hear from a lot of people who will say, well, my dog's got a collar and a tag. But like you said, they slip out. I just did a favorite products episode and I was talking about a thing that I love, which is a martingale collar, because
Yep.
too many times people either have their collars too loose or like my dog has a big fat bulldog neck and she does have a big fat head, but the big fat head is just that much smaller than her neck that no regular collar can be tight enough without choking her to not go over her head should she try to pull away or just sit down and decide she doesn't want to move anymore. So yeah, you know, having a collar and tags is awesome, but if it's hanging at the end of your leash and your dog is a mile away, it's not doing you any good. I know I also see a lot when I see posts for lost pets, and I've probably seen it 100 times. He wasn't wearing his collar because he just got a bath. Put him outside to dry off, shake off, or whatever, or they bathed him outside or her, and the next thing you know, it's gone and it has no identification. So you know, you're so close yet so far at that point.
Yep.
Is there anything statistically or just from your opinion, how much does it increase the odds that I'm going to get my pet back if the pet is microchipped?
Yeah, I think it's going to greatly increase the odds. So if you think about it, most likely, if your dog or cat were, again, to be picked up by a Good Samaritan and taken to a veterinarian and they scan it or animal control, the fact that we have that personal identifier that can then track back to you and we can reunite you, I mean, that already increases the odds substantially versus
Mm-hmm.
having no identification makes it almost zero that we may reunite you with your dog. But having that really greatly increases the chance. And from a home again perspective, we actually get a phone call about every 6 minutes in terms of a pet owner saying Fluffy got out or Max ran away or something like that. And so we get a phone call about every 6 minutes to report a pet loss. And then
Wow.
we've actually reunited more than 3 million pets with their owners. So we have a great in terms of statistics reuniting those animals. 3 million is, I mean, that's a lot of animals. And there's about 10 million animals in our database alone. So a lot of animals out there have microchips. So a lot of people see the value in microchipping their pet.
Yeah. Another common thing I see on Facebook and other places where people have lost a pet, or I'll even have owners tell me, "Do I really need that? Because my cat's an indoor cat." It's like, yeah, until somebody leaves the door open.
Yep.
And none of my cats wear collars. Maybe I'm a horrible person, but I just have never put collars on my cats. They are all microchipped, and I can't tell you the amount of times that one in particular has ended up in the yard. Or I had a cat that was gone for 10 days right before Christmas because the last person who went out the door after that Christmas party didn't shut the door all the way, and I woke up about 1 a.m. freezing my butt off because the back door was wide open and Bandit was gone. And the feeling of knowing that number one, that was my fault, and not being able to find him for 10 days, and the signs and the searching the neighborhood and the worry and wonder about what's happening to him is just, I don't wish that on anybody for their pet. And he could have been found and had that microchip scans, sooner, it would have saved us a lot of heartache. And thank God he did come back. But too many pets don't find their way back because as somebody that rescues them, I can very often tell, like sometimes it's so obvious that a pet is owned, but we have no way to track back the owner because there's no tag, there's no microchip. I don't see any signs anywhere, and people don't necessarily know what to do to get their pet back. So it's sad because somebody's hurting really badly when that pet is missing.
Yep. I have nothing has created more panic in me. My wife accuses me of being a helicopter parent with our cats. And when they have gotten loose, it's that sinking feeling. So I've been there with you. So having
Yeah.
somebody to reach out to, especially, I love the fact that you can call somebody at home again versus just an email or web form and be like, hey, Fluffy got loose, and that help you kind of through that in terms of just that sinking feeling that we all get when we've lost a pet.
Yeah, and it actually even just happened to me the other day too. I have this little, we brought in this little, like a 10-pound, very genetically messed up looking little French bulldog, and nobody had gone out, but the dog disappeared. And I was freaking out. I got in my car. I'm driving up and down the street because we'd literally just gotten her. She had no collar on, no microchip. She had mange, and so we hadn't really done much to her yet. And I was on the phone with animal control saying, hey, if you happen to get this animal picked up. And then I heard this strange snorting noise coming from underneath the recliner, and she was in this, it has a slipcover on it, and she was like in the hammock that she'd made of the slipcover. And it's
Huh.
like, I mean, I was dying and I was panicking about this
Yep.
dog missing. And so it's just, again, it's just a terrible feeling.
Yep.
One of the things that I used to run into when I was volunteering at an animal control facility where we routinely microchipped the animals before adoption is that there were a lot of misconceptions or maybe concerns that people had about microchips. Everything from, can a microchip give my pet cancer, to I remember one lady in particular that was really concerned about whether that microchip was like a tracking device that everybody would have all her information. Can you talk to some of the misconceptions that you have heard and share the truth?
Yeah, yeah, and that's something I've heard those similar concerns. So I think in terms of, oh my gosh, it's gonna cause cancer in my dog or something like that. And microchips are extremely, extremely safe. So they're hermetically sealed. So what that means is, hey, when we implant them, they're not going to react with your dog's body. So they're not going to react to fluids in your dog's body or cat, or the fat or anything like that. So they're very, very safe. If they weren't safe, I wouldn't put them in my own pet. So that's what I always tell pet owners is every animal I've had has always been microchipped. So they're very safe. And then some of those other kind of misconceptions that, yeah, in terms of, is this gonna be tracking me, or is this going to be, listening in on me, or things like that? Nope, there's no GPS tracker in those microchips. There's no microphone in those microchips. There's no way we can actually look, on a computer or a cell phone and see, you or your dog moving or anything like that. So, nope, there's no GPS. I think some of the other misconceptions are, we're all concerned about privacy nowadays. That's been a big point of discussion, I think, around microchips too. Is my information going to be in that microchip, and is that person going to scan that microchip and be able to know my name and my date of birth and where I live? Nope, that none of that information is available. So the only thing when we scan a microchip is the number, and then also usually the manufacturer 800 number, and then certain microchips also have basically temperature sensing technology. So there's a little bit of data that we get off of there, but nothing that's going to expose your personal information. So from a privacy standpoint, it's very, very safe as well.
Right. And one thing I want to, and feel free to add on or correct if I am incorrect in stating this, but one of the things, because I was one of the people that did a lot of the calling, and we do it at the rescue. We've got scanners, we scan, we get a number, we call the microchip company, and they have the contact information for the owner, but the owner has the ability to say, you can share this information or you can't. So there are some times when I've called and they were a lot, and they will provide me, not just some random person off the street, but somebody who is representing an actual rescue. They verify that we're a real rescue. They get our phone number and our name and all of that. And, then they'll provide us the contact information. But I have called, and we use home again chips. We happen to use home again chips. Mm-hmm. And, it'll say, the owner, I can't remember the verbiage that they use, but basically the owner has opted not to have their information shared. So Home Again actually does the contacting and then has the owner get back in touch with us. Is that accurate to state it that way?
Yeah, so in terms of that, you basically hit the nail on the head in terms of, yeah,
Okay.
we're very, very protective of that personal information. And so, yep, if I was a veterinarian, I'd call and say, hey, this is the number I found. And Home Again will say, great, we will contact that owner, and then we'll kind of work on that reunification from there. But they are very, very careful to disclose any information because again, we're very aware of how sensitive privacy issues are nowadays. We want to keep everybody's information as private as possible.
Definitely. As far as microchips, I mean, obviously Home Again's not the only microchip company, and I will say that we have used other ones. I know one of the frustrations that I've run into in trying to, you scan an animal, you get a number, and if it's not a major company like Home Again, sometimes it can be super tricky to even get a hold of or to even find out what company it is. We'll go online to the, I think it's American Animal Hospital Association that does the website where you can put in the number. And it's occasionally come back with this. It could be any number of these companies. And then you start calling and like, nope, it's not ours. Nope, it's not ours. So that's leading me to the question of, why is it so important to pick a quality or a good or a reputable, I don't know what word I want to use, microchip and the company itself when you have that option to do that for your pet?
Yeah, and I think that's a very important distinction there because There are many things that Home Again, as I say, brings to the table for your pet. So we have been in business a very long time. So we have a long history. So it's not like we're going to be bought and sold and bought and sold. Some of the smaller companies are kind of, bought and sold pretty regularly. So we have a
Mm-hmm.
long history. We have what we call our advanced lost pet recovery service. So basically, that's our calling center. So, hey, you can call us, you can email us, you can send us a form, whatever communication works for you. And I know some of us have no problem picking up the phone and calling. Some of us would love to do everything by text message. So there's all these kind of different ways, in terms of reaching out to us. But that is very, very important in terms of, especially, I believe, having that ability to call and talk to somebody. Because I don't know about you, but when I've lost my pets in the past, I don't feel comfortable just sending an email or just filling out a form. I want to know that somebody got that information and they are actively
Immediately.
trying to,
Yeah.
yep, exactly. And they're, because we all know time is of the essence. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to know that somebody has that information that's been recorded in the system, everything like that, versus just sending an email or again hoping that somebody gets back to me, or even that email didn't get lost in cyberspace. There's always that potential out there in terms of stuff getting lost in the shuffle. So having a well-staffed resources behind the microchip is just as important as the microchip itself. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, but having that well-staffed group of people really makes the chances of being reunited with your pet even higher.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important that people, because we've had people, our Home Again chips are, it's rolled into the adoption fee, and our adoption fees are quite low. But I also do, in my professional paid job, I do consulting with veterinarians, and sometimes people will complain, or we'll do like a clinic, and it's like, you want me to pay this amount, $25? It's like that. And people will complain about the price, but, it kind of goes back to the old adage in many instances that you get what you pay for, at least I think. If somebody didn't know, like maybe, and we're gonna talk about how people can know where their chip came from and that kind of thing, but is there some type of global database where microchips get registered, so that if I had the number for my microchip but I didn't remember what company it came from, or I couldn't get a hold of somebody because maybe it's not a 24/7 operation like you are, is there somewhere I can go out to say, hey, my pet is lost?
Yeah, so in terms of being able to try to figure those things out, there's not a international or national database of everything where you can get all that information like that per se. But
Mm-hmm.
as you were kind of talking earlier, so AHA, so the American Animal Hospital Association. So AHA, if you were to Google AHA microchip lookup, you can go to
Mm-hmm.
their website, and if you have the microchip number of your pet, you can put that information in there, and you put in the microchip number. Again, it's not going to say who the chip is registered to in terms of your personal information. But what it will hopefully tell you is, hey, this microchip is registered to Home Again. Here is Home Again's contact information. Here's their website information, all those things. And this chip was last registered on January of 2023 or January 31st of 2023. So I actually tend to use that database a lot. I do a lot of outreach clinics, so kind of like free outreach clinics, and I have a lot of people that their address may not be a stable address, or they may kind of be in between homes, things like that. But they come to get services, and they want to know, hey, does my dog have a microchip? And can you
Mm-hmm.
tell me, the number and things like that? So I actually use that website pretty frequently to figure out what their microchip number is. Say, hey, this is the person you need to call to make sure what information is in there, all those things. And I think that gives people peace of mind to know exactly what that microchip number is, who their company is, who they need to call, all those different things. And it's easily found for pet owners, usually through the AHA website.
Yeah, that's good for people to know for sure. Some organizations will wait until the animal goes to be spayed or neutered and do the microchip then. We don't do that here because that animal that we might adopt out, if I adopt out, let's say, a 10-week-old kitten, that animal's not going to get neutered until around 5 months or so. And that's a long time to go without a microchip. So we microchip right here. And I know a lot of times people have expressed concern about, oh, is it going to hurt my pet? Or they don't want to look when we're doing it. And I'll be perfectly honest. Sometimes I've microchipped little kittens and it's like nothing happened to them. I happen to be pretty quick and pretty fast at it. And then there have been other animals where you barely start touching them and They're acting like they're being murdered. We have some melodramatic animals. So, does it actually really hurt the pet, or is it really just kind of maybe a personality of the pet if they have a bad reaction? Because sometimes people get a little concerned about that.
Yeah, that's definitely a good question because I do think, yep, you think, oh my gosh, needle going into pet, it's going to hurt and things like that. And I think it's like you and I when we go get a vaccine or something like that, when we get an injection, it does have just that little kind of pinprick for just a second when we're getting that injection. Same when we're giving a microchip, there is just a little bit of pop through the skin, but there's some ways we can kind of address that. So when I was a shelter veterinarian, I microchipped most of the pets on intake. There was a few that I would microchip at the time of surgery, just that they were really rambunctious or things like that. But then if I did my public facing events, I actually used what we call the mini chips, and they're actually a little bit smaller. And the pet seems to not be as reactive because I'm in Arizona. As I tell people, I live in the land of Chihuahuas, and I see a lot of Chihuahuas. And I found that sometimes using those mini chips, they don't necessarily hurt less or anything like that, but I do think it doesn't cause quite the reaction. And then the pet owner has a better experience with it. So, and the pet
Right.
has a better experience too. So I think sometimes there are different ways we can go with that depending on if you're a pet owner yourself or if you are a rescue organization or if you're listening to this and you're doing some outreach work. I think sometimes using those mini chips also works really well.
Yeah, that's definitely good to know. It's always that concern that to have that reaction in front of the pet owner and then they think, oh, you've done something wrong or,
Yep.
my pet's hurt now because of it. So the microchips, you were talking about how safe they are from the standpoint of being enclosed and not reacting with the animal's body. So once they get in there, do they work forever? Can they fail? Do they stay in place? Because that's one thing that I have run into with animals, especially older animals where the microchips were done years ago that I've scanned the body and not found it between the shoulder blades. I found it in the leg. What's the story there?
Yeah, and we were talking kind of before the show. So my yellow lab had two microchips, and the reason was, yep, she got her first microchip, and I can't even remember the name of the company. It was so long ago, but it went between the shoulder blades. And then about a year later, I had her in vet school, and we were scanning our dogs or something like that, and I found that her microchip was down in her right leg.
Mm.
And it migrated. So one thing I do really, really like about the home again microchips is we have this what we call our biobond technology. So when we place that microchip between the shoulder blades, like most of us usually do, it's going to stay there, which is great. It's not going to move. And that is really, really important because most of the time, those of us that are going to scan animals, yes, hopefully we're scanning head to tail and all the legs and everywhere in between just to make sure. But sometimes you have somebody or you have a dog that's jumping around, it's hard to scan. And we
Hmm.
want it to be in between those shoulder blades so it's easy to scan there and pick up. In terms of is it battery operated or is there moving parts to it or things like that, there's no actively moving parts to it. There's no battery to replace. You don't have to go back in 6 years later and change out a battery or something like that. It's good for life. The only
Okay.
thing that's going to activate that chip is when we take our scanner and we scan over the top of it. That's going to cause enough to activate that chip to get that identification number off the chip again. But then that's all we're going to do. And again, it's lifetime, no need to replace, no need to replace because of movement because we got that strong biobond technology that's going to hold it in place.
That's definitely good to know because you're right. It does make it easier when because that's always where you start is right between those shoulder blades. And it's like if you don't find anything, then you start kind of going around and it can be tricky with a wiggly pet or to be perfectly honest, when you've got an animal control facility that's bringing in dozens of animals in a day,
Mhm.
it might become real easy to just do a quick scan and assume there's no chip and there might actually be one. So that's good to know that the technology is certainly getting better from this standpoint, like as far as maybe a step by step or however you want to phrase it, if I discover my pet has gone missing, what are some things that I can do other than my pet being microchipped, but in that process of trying to find my pet to increase the odds that I'm going to get my pet back?
Yeah, there are several things that we can do. And this is like, hey, we all have our smartphones nowadays. So on my smartphone, for all of my animals, I actually have a contact card for each one of my pets. And it has their picture, it has their microchip number, and it has their basic information, date of birth, things like that, any little kind of important little tidbits. And I actually always have that with me, obviously, on my phone. And I think most of us nowadays, we can't leave our smartphone sitting for more than 5 minutes. So we can use that to kind of our advantage and create those contact cards. So I think that is really helpful too, again, because if our pet were to go missing, we would have that information at our fingertips. We know, hey, this is the home again number. This is my pet's microchip. This is a picture of my pet, all those different things. So then when we do call in to home again and we say, hey, this is the microchip, that's going to make the process so much easier. Because again, I don't know about you, but we've talked about it. When you lose your pet, you have that moment of, oh my gosh, panic. I don't know the microchip number. I can't remember this. I can't remember that. It's all right there. And that's why I create those contact cards for my own pets, because it's just peace of mind. I'm ready to go if the unthinkable happens type of thing.
Right.
Putting up, I always say, and we have our Home Again premium service. And this is kind of where the confusion is where, hey, it doesn't cost any money ever to keep your information up to date with Home Again. So if you move, if you get a new cell phone number, if you get a new email address, all those things, that doesn't cost you any money at all to call in and update your information. The premium services, there is a yearly fee associated with that, but part of that yearly fee that you get, and it's I think it's a very reasonable fee, you get somebody that's going to actively help you look for your animal. So they're going to print up posters for you that say, hey, Fluffy went missing. Here's a picture of Fluffy and Fluffy's information. They're going to hopefully when Fluffy's found, if Fluffy's lost a great distance, and we're going to help send Fluffy home with up to a certain dollar money. So maybe we need to fly Fluffy back from another state or something like that. So there's all kinds of other services that we offer through our premium services to help you get reunited with your pet. Because at the end of the day, we want all pets to be with their owners. We know at the end of the day that pets do their best with their owners. As much as I am a shelter veterinarian, I'm one of those people that, hey, if we didn't have to have shelters tomorrow and all pets were with their owners all the time, that'd be fantastic. I wish I could be out of a job,
Me too. The rescue life is it can be rewarding, but it's a lot of work. And if it wasn't needed, I'd be happy to do something else and just do this podcast all the time.
Yep, exactly. Do all the fun stuff.
Exactly. A good point that you made, because we register the chips initially because we want to make sure that the numbers are entered correctly, that the name is entered correctly, the address and everything else, that there's no typos or anything like that. And we've also found that in our experience, and this is coming from my previous experience, if you hand an owner an adoption packet with the little Home Again tag, and it's like, here's your tag, here's the registration form, go do it yourself, it's shocking how many people don't do it. So we just do it. We just do it for them when the animal gets adopted. But another thing that I've found too is that people don't register the chip, or they don't, update the registration on the chip. And that's something that pet parents really need to realize, is that if you're, like you and I were talking before, you've moved multiple times. I've probably moved 12 times in my adult life. And if you don't keep that microchip information updated, it can get super hard to track you down. They go looking for me on Ramblewood Drive in Colorado Springs. I don't know that they'd be able to figure out where I am now, because I've moved 3 times since then. So it's so important for pet parents to make sure that that's updated. And I'm glad you said that, because I've had a lot of people come back and say, well, I was going to update it, but then it was this fee and I didn't want to pay the fee. And there is no fee to go in and just update your microchip. So I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yep.
Is there any other maintenance or anything that needs to be done regarding the chip, or it's just in there and does its thing when you need it to do it?
There really is. Once you implant it, in terms of actual things with the chip, it is good to go. There's nothing to go back and do. The most important thing, kind of what you just talked about, is, hey, let's update that information. And to kind of tag along with that, what we're seeing in a lot of major cities now is animal control officers will have scanners. And if your dog gets out or your cat gets out and animal control picks it up, animal control doesn't want to take that dog or cat back to the shelter. They would rather scan that dog right there, pull the microchip information, be able to contact the microchip company and take that dog or cat back to its home and not even take it to the shelter. So it's return to owner in the field is becoming more and more popular. So that is one reason, when you move, update your address. I think we kind of forget about that, but update your address, because if the dog's 2 blocks down the road, great. Here's your dog again. Didn't even have to go to the shelter.
Yeah, and one of the things that when I was in the military, you had your address, which is where you were living, but always on your record there was an address, and it's not fail proof, but there was an address, and I just used my parents' address because they weren't moving anytime soon. So at least somebody would be able to be contacted. So for those people who might be listening, like if you're younger or you're on the road, I've got a friend whose daughter is a traveling nurse, and it's like, it's kind of hard to put an address, and she's not traveling with a pet, but if she was, like maybe she had a cat with her or something like that, then give your mom's address, because at least your mom will know where to find you, because you do have the ability to list more than one contact person for that chip. So find somebody permanent and stable in your life to put on that microchip so they can at least get a hold of you. What about reunion stories? Do you have any happy ending stories because somebody had a microchip that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty to pick from. I think I'm going to go into the two reunion stories, but I think kind of the one holiday I always like to talk about is July 4th. Always make sure your pet is microchipped and information is up to date, because July 4th is the biggest time of the year when animals go missing.
Mm,
When we go to work July 5th in an animal shelter, it's the busiest day of the year. So just kind of
mm-hmm.
keep that in mind in terms of reunification things, is that helps us a lot. But in terms of two stories, in terms of home again reunification stories, Kodak is a great example. So Kodak was under the care of the owner's neighbor, and Kodak was like, I know this house, but I don't know this house great. And Kodak got out and got loose. And unfortunately, Kodak was gone for several months. And this was during the pandemic, and Kodak's owners ended up having to move to California. And, oh my gosh, we never found our pet, and now we got to move. And what happened eventually is Kodak did end up getting scanned. Somebody called home again and said, hey, we found this dog. They didn't know the name was Kodak. We found this dog. And because of that, Home Again was able to get in touch with the owners of Kodak and get Kodak back with their family in California with their owners. And obviously, that's a great story. So we always like to
Yeah.
hear stories like that. The other thing too, and this other one I think is a really good story because it helps to illustrate. I have a diabetic cat, so insulin twice a day. Well, this dog, his name was Spooky, and Spooky got loose, and Spooky was an epileptic, so on twice daily medications, older dog, not really being able to see well, all those things that kind of go on with dogs and epilepsy. Ended up getting loose, unfortunately, got spooked and got loose. And the good thing is hey, I think it was about 5 miles down the road that the dog got picked up by a Good Samaritan. They took that Spooky into their veterinarian. The vet scanned it, got the microchip number, and was able to get Spooky back with his owner very quickly, which is very important because especially for our older animals that are on, once daily medications or twice daily medications, that can be really, really important and very life-saving for Spooky that he was able to get back with his owners and be on his epilepsy medication and do just fine.
That's great. That's a good story. One of my most interesting experiences was a very senior, very visually impaired poodle that came into animal control, and she was matted and she was a mess, and we had a heck of a time sort of tracking back the microchip because of the moves and things like that. But this is in Texas, so we're outside of Houston, Texas. The dog's family lived in California, and
Wow.
no idea, no concept, no clue how the dog went from California to Texas, but it had been several years, like 4 or 5 years that dog had been missing. The unfortunate thing, well, it was a happy ending because we were able to get a new home for the dog. The unfortunate part was the family, by the time that we had contacted them, it was during one of the California wildfires, and their house had burned and they were in a shelter, so they weren't in a position to take her back. So sad ending, but at the same time, it was a happy ending for them because it's the unknown, like whatever happened
Yeah.
to, we called her Veronica, but whatever happened to Veronica, and wondering how she's being treated or whether she's hungry. I mean, that's just, you live with that. I still want to know what happened to my cat Snippy that disappeared when I was in kindergarten, and I'm
Yep.
57 years old. It's like, okay, I don't dwell on it, but for years it really bugged me, like what happened to Snippy. And so
Yep.
they felt so much better knowing that at least she was well, she was being cared for, and we promised to find her, and we did find her a wonderful new home. So it can be a happy ending story in many different ways
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. One thing I want to
Okay.
stress too, because I don't want people to discount the value of doing some of the traditional things that you would do to find your pet, microchip or not, just to kind of stress that. Because number one, like you had mentioned, the idea of return in the field when that animal control officer can just scan and then take that pet back to your house, and that's so true. I mean, they don't want to go through the process of even just the paperwork. And if it doesn't motivate you any other way, if your community's shelter is a kill shelter, if they can return that animal in the field and not have to bring it back to the shelter, then it might save somebody another day of life, because if there's no space in that shelter, they have to make decisions about where they're going to put your pet, because they have to hold it for 3 business days or whatever their rules might be. So to be able to just turn around and go down the block, and it's so often it's just down the block around the corner that they find that pet. So, a great reason for microchip, but do use the traditional methods of putting posters up to find your pet, because it's too often that it may not make it to animal control to get scanned, and somebody might just find it. And it's shocking to me how many people will find an animal, not bother to try to scan it. They assume it's lost. They assume nobody's caring for it because it doesn't have a collar, and they just keep it or they give it away or something like that. So that happens. And then I think also making sure your pet does have a collar with identification, because your average neighbor around the block from you doesn't have a microchip scanner. But more than likely, if they find your pet with a collar and a tag, there's a presumption, which is not necessarily a correct one, that if it doesn't have a collar and tag and it looks scruffy, then somebody dumped it and nobody wanted it. And it may
Yep.
just be that my dog Gigi looks scruffy when she goes out and gets mouthed on by the bulldog slobbering all over her, and she comes back looking like she needs a bath and a haircut kind of thing, and she just left the house. So people make a lot of assumptions about animals based on their condition, and one of the things is if it doesn't have a collar and tags, you must not want it back very badly. So definitely do put the collar and the tags on your pets. Yes, they can come off sometimes, but it's worth a try to have that extra level of identification, I think.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. And unfortunately, to the presumptions that people make, I've seen that happen as well. So I think having those collars, those tags, et cetera, really can help. But then also the microchip is always a good backup plan for sure.
Definitely. Any other points or anything that we've missed so far? Because I think we've covered some good ground and hopefully have convinced people of the value of microchipping their pets. But anything else you'd like to share with us that might help people make that good decision?
Yeah, I think it's always good to share kind of personal experiences. And yes, I'm a veterinarian. I'm married to a veterinarian, and we've had times where, hey, we had a new cat that I didn't get microchipped, and he got out. I'm glad we got him back. It was about 5 or 6 days before we got him back. But even veterinarians, sometimes we forget to microchip. So I never want people to think, oh my gosh, I'm a bad pet owner because I haven't gotten my pet microchipped. But I think if you've listened to this podcast and you've kind of listened to the points, hey, you haven't gotten your pet microchip. There's no shame in that. Go to your veterinarian. Go to maybe a shelter's doing an outreach event, things like that. There are plenty of shelters that do low cost or free microchips because they want to make sure that your pet gets microchipped because they don't want your pet to get lost and end up in their shelter. So they're going to do
Right.
microchipping for you as well. So take advantage of those things because I think it's very, very important. And again, I'm a veterinarian. I'm supposed to be this perfect, when it comes to doing everything perfect for my pets. And even I've forgotten to microchip. So if you listen to it, now's the time to make that appointment with your veterinarian or call your local shelter to get your pet microchipped.
And to add to that, because you just made me think of one other thing that pet parents want to do is when you do get an animal from a shelter or a rescue and they tell you that the animal's microchipped and they give you the paperwork, either ask them to scan it. Can you just scan it for my peace of mind? Can you scan it for me so I can see the number to make sure that it actually, because sometimes the documents get separated from the animal and the presumption is it's been done and it hasn't been done. And if you're too uncomfortable to do that, then when you get that first, which you should anytime you get a new pet anyway, you get that new pet visit to your veterinarian, have them scanned. A lot of veterinarians are just kind of doing that automatically at every visit or at first visit, but have them scan your pet, have them record the microchip number, write it down for yourself, and just confirm that it is registered, that it's registered properly, that it's got your right address. Because we're human. So even if somebody is doing their very, very best, yours could be the pet where somebody thought that that one got microchipped and it didn't. Or somebody transposed a number on the microchip number, because those numbers are not short, friends. They are long numbers.
Yep,
and so it
they
would
are.
be really easy as somebody is looking at the microchip paper and typing it into a computer that they make a mistake, or they put the wrong zip code or the wrong house number on your house. So please, please, please do make sure that your pet does have a chip, that it's registered properly, has all the correct information, because it can't save your pet's life if the information is bad. I mean, it's only as good as the information that's associated with the chip. So that's so important to note.
Very, very, very important. I agree with everything you said. Very important.
So, Dr. Matt, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's so good to have, because I feel like I'm preaching all the time, and to have somebody that's not only a veterinarian but an expert, has that extra expert knowledge about the importance of microchips and how they work. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise, your experience, being vulnerable to admit you've made mistakes as well and have learned from those like we all have. Thank you so much for being on the show here today. I really appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. I really, really enjoyed it. And I wish you the best of luck in terms of everything you do for your community as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you all to everybody who's listening now for listening to another episode of Starlight Pet Talk. I feel like I say every single week, this is a super important episode. Make sure you share it with everybody you know. And it's not just me trying to get more people to listen to the podcast, although we like that. So please do share the podcast with your friends. But especially with this topic, it is just so important. It can be life-saving. It can mean the difference between you seeing your pet again and never seeing your pet again, when you just, make that effort to get that microchip and make sure that it is properly registered for your pet. So we love our pets. We do anything for them. We spend lots of time and money on them. This is something that's such a small thing that we can do, and it makes such a huge difference. So please become a microchip advocate like I am, and like Dr. Matt is, and get your friends, family members to microchip their pets. Thanks for listening to Starlight Pet Talk. Be sure to visit our website at www.starlightpettalk.com for more resources, and be sure to follow this podcast on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss a show. If you enjoyed and found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate a rating on Apple. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would be great too. Don't forget to tune in next week and every week for a brand new episode of Starlight Pet Talk. And if you don't do anything else this week, give your pets a big hug from us.